At 3:14 a.m., I locked myself in the motel back office while the long-term resident from room 12 scratched at the lobby glass with a rusted screwdriver. He wasn't the only guest who brought horror to my front desk, nor was he the most disturbing. These are the true, documented accounts of the unsettling encounters we faced behind the front desk. Story 1, The Long-Term Resident. This happened to me in the fall of 2019, when I was working nights at the Desert Willow Inn, a classic, faded roadside motel just off Route 17, about 50 miles out from El Paso. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., a stretch of hours where the world felt like it was holding its breath, especially in a place like that. Most nights were dead quiet. I'd sit behind the scuffed laminate counter, nursing lukewarm coffee, watching static fuzz on an old TV, or reading tattered paperbacks. The kind of quiet where you could hear the ancient ice machine groaning down the hall, or the occasional distant rumble of an 18-wheeler tearing past on the highway. It was a lonely job, sure, but I liked the solitude. There were no demanding bosses, no rush-hour stress, just the vast, indifferent desert sky outside and the occasional weary traveler needing a room for the night. You got used to the strange rhythms of the dark. The air always carried a faint scent of dust and stale coffee, a comfort in its predictability. I'd check the few empty rooms, make sure the doors were locked, switch off any forgotten lights. It was a ritual, a way to pass the hours until the dawn broke and the daytime manager, Brenda, arrived with her cheerful, oblivious demeanor. Nothing ever really happened there. I recall one particularly uneventful Tuesday, the kind where the silence itself seemed to hum. The only sound was the distant wind whistling around the eaves, a mournful, constant presence. I had just finished my usual rounds, ensuring everything was secure, when I noticed something new on the registry. A check-in for room 7, made late that afternoon, signed simply Mr. Thorne. Not unusual, but the duration was noted, long-term stay. We rarely had those. Most people were just passing through. I made a mental note to say hello if I saw him. Days turned into a week, then 2. I never saw Mr. Thorne. His car, an older sedan, was always parked meticulously in front of room 7, but I never saw him leave or enter. No requests for fresh towels, no complaints, no sounds from his room. Just a quiet, unwavering presence. It was peculiar, but not unheard of. Some people kept to themselves. I just figured he was a writer, or someone on extended business who kept odd hours. One night, around 3 a.m., as I was dozing off, a faint scratching sound brought me alert. It came from under the office door. I leaned down cautiously, heart thudding a little. There, pushed halfway under the door, was a folded piece of paper. My hand trembled slightly as I picked it up. It was a note, written in neat, almost elegant script, "Do not disturb. Need more quiet. T." More quiet. It was the quietest motel on earth. I shrugged it off, assuming he meant he didn't want the maid service. I taped a "Do not disturb" sign to his door the next morning, though I doubted anyone would be disturbing him anyway. That was the first note. They continued, every few nights. Always slipped under the office door, always cryptic. The walls are too thin, one read. Silence is not enough, another. I started feeling a prickle of unease. Who lived like this? Who stayed in a motel room for weeks, never leaving, only communicating through strange demands for more quiet? I tried to catch him once, staying awake, peering through the office window at room 7. Nothing. His lights were always off, or at least, no light escaped the heavy blackout curtains. It was like the room was empty, a dark void in the middle of our small, sleeping establishment. Then came a note that truly chilled me. It wasn't a demand, it was a statement: they are getting louder. The soil wants to sing. This one was written on a crumpled piece of paper, the handwriting less elegant, almost frantic. The words felt wrong. I started avoiding eye contact with room 7, even from across the parking lot. I found myself listening intently for any sound from his room during my shift. A cough, a TV, anything. There was never anything. Just the drone of the highway, the creak of the motel, and the unsettling, absolute silence from room 7. It was a silence that felt heavy, unnatural. My skin would crawl whenever I walked past his room during my rounds. I started taking the long way around, making excuses to avoid that stretch of the corridor. The thought of what might be happening behind that door, or what wasn't happening, began to fester in my mind. The long-term resident was becoming a long-term problem for my nerves. The manager, Brenda, never noticed anything amiss. She just saw the check marked off on her ledger, and Mr. Thorne's payment coming in on time. Some people just prefer privacy, she'd say, when I once tried to casually mention his reclusive habits. But this wasn't privacy, this was absence. Then, for 3 nights straight, no notes. A strange relief washed over me, immediately followed by a wave of even deeper unease. The absence of the notes felt worse than their presence. What had happened? Had he checked out? But his car was still there, parked exactly the same. On the 4th night without a note, it started. A faint, cloying smell, barely perceptible at first, like damp earth mixed with something vaguely sweet and sickly. It seemed to cling to the air around room 7, a silent, creeping invasion. My stomach churned instantly. I tried to ignore it. Maybe a dead animal in the walls, I reasoned, though the smell was too specific, too organic. It intensified with each passing hour, growing from a hint to a definite, stomach-lurching stench. It was the smell of something decaying, something that had been buried too long. I walked past room 7 again, holding my breath. The air grew thick, heavy. The smell was undeniably coming from inside the room. The door was still latched, the "Do Not Disturb" sign still crookedly taped to it. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Brenda would be furious if I went in. We had strict policies about respecting guest privacy. But this wasn't about privacy anymore. This was about a smell that no living, healthy human being could possibly produce. This was about a quiet that had gone beyond solitude and into something sinister. The motel's master key felt heavy and cold in my palm. My breath hitched. Every instinct screamed at me to call the police, but what would I tell them? My weird, quiet guest smells bad. They'd laugh me off the phone. I had to see for myself. I had to know. The hallway felt endless as I approached room 7. The air grew colder, and the smell became an assault, filling my nostrils, coating the back of my throat. My hand shook so violently, it took 3 tries to insert the keycard into the lock. The click echoed in the unnerving silence. I pushed the door open, just a crack. The stench hit me full force, a foul, earthy wave. My eyes watered. But what I saw, or rather didn't see, was even more disturbing. The room was pristine. Spotless. No mess, no scattered belongings, no sign of a struggle. The bed was neatly made. The small table by the window was empty. Not a single personal item anywhere. It was as if no one had ever lived there, let alone died there. But the smell persisted, stronger than ever, originating from the very center of the room. Then I saw it. In the exact middle of the immaculate carpet, directly under the faded ceiling light, was a mound of dark, freshly turned soil. A small hill of rich, damp earth. And half buried within it, peeking out like a forgotten treasure, was a child's worn, plastic toy dinosaur. My blood ran cold. My mind screamed, but no sound escaped my throat. And then, from the mound, faint but unmistakable, came a sound. A soft, wet, childlike weeping. Not loud, not urgent, but a slow, sorrowful sound, like a broken music box playing a lullaby. Mr. Thorne was gone. There was only the dirt. And the weeping. My entire body locked up. My eyes were fixed on that tiny, trembling mound of earth. The smell, the sound, the impossible sight. My mind shattered. I stumbled back, clawing at the doorframe, desperate to escape. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember running. The next thing I truly recall is the police officers, their faces grim, shining flashlights in my eyes. Brenda was there, looking utterly bewildered. They found me huddled in the office, muttering. They found me days later, catatonic. They say I just kept repeating two phrases over and over. The quiet soil. And empty rooms. I couldn't tell them about the weeping. Couldn't explain the toy. Couldn't make them understand what I had heard. Mr. Thorne was never found. His car was still in the lot when they investigated, but the room, it was clean. Immaculate. No dirt, no smell, no toy. Nothing. Like I had imagined it all. But I didn't. I heard it. I smelled it. I saw it. They boarded up room 7 permanently. They said it was for structural damage, but I knew. I knew they sensed something too. Something that couldn't be explained away, something that lingered in the very fabric of that desolate motel. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just right, I still hear that faint, sorrowful weeping. And I wonder, who truly owned the quiet soil? Was it Thorne, or was Thorne just another seed? And if you ever find yourself alone on a night shift, in a quiet, forgotten place, remember that some absences are louder than any scream. And some rooms are never truly empty. Story 2, The Late-Night Deliveries. This happened to me in the fall of 2019, when I was working nights at the dusty old Crossroads Inn, on the outskirts of Blackwood, a blink-and-you-miss-it kind of town right off Interstate 70. My shift was always from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., the graveyard shift, which suited me fine. I liked the quiet, the predictable rhythm of the dark hours. The Crossroads Inn wasn't exactly a 5-star establishment. It was more of a last resort for weary truckers or families who'd missed a turn. Most nights were slow, just a few check-ins, then hours of flipping through old paperbacks or listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights in the empty lobby. The air always smelled faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant. I'd seen my share of strange people pass through those doors, of course. Drifters, late-night revelers, once a guy who tried to pay with a handful of foreign coins and a pet parrot. But I'd developed a thick skin, a knack for spotting trouble, and more importantly, a routine that kept things calm. Nothing ever truly bothered me. That particular night started just like any other. The clock on the wall above the reservation desk ticked slowly towards midnight. A light drizzle had started outside, drumming softly against the roof, promising a quiet, uneventful few hours until the morning rush of checkouts. I was just pouring myself another cup of lukewarm coffee when they arrived. The loneliness of the night shift could sometimes get to people, but I was past that. I found a certain comfort in the solitude, a peace that only the deep hours could offer. The only real interruptions were the occasional phone call or the distant rumble of a semi-truck passing by on the interstate. It was just past 1 a.m. when a beat-up pickup truck, towing a medium-sized U-Haul trailer, rumbled into the parking lot. The couple that emerged looked as disheveled as their vehicle. The man was tall and gaunt, his eyes sunken, his hair a mess. The woman was shorter, her clothes rumpled, clutching a worn purse like it contained the last secret in the world. Their faces were pale, almost gray in the dim yellow light of the parking lot lamps. They shuffled inside, avoiding eye contact. When I asked for their names, the man mumbled something quickly, his voice raspy. They insisted on a ground floor room, one of the more secluded ones at the far end of the property. I usually tried to keep those rooms free for long-term guests, but something in their hurried, intense manner made me just hand over the key card to room 113 without argument. They barely glanced at the receipt. They just grabbed the key and practically scurried back out into the rain. I watched them from the window as they drove the pickup and trailer around to the back, parking right outside room 113. It struck me as odd. Usually, people just park near the lobby and unload what they need. A few minutes later, I saw them. Not carrying suitcases, but two bulky, oddly shaped bundles wrapped in dark tarpaulins. They moved with a strange, almost frantic energy, shoulders hunched, back straining. It looked heavy, whatever it was, and they took great care not to let it touch the ground as they navigated the puddles. I shrugged it off. Maybe they were moving, had some antique furniture, or some specialized equipment. People move odd things. It was a motel, after all, not a bank vault. I went back to my book, trying to ignore the faint, rhythmic thuds that carried on the damp air, suggesting more trips from the trailer to their room. But the thuds didn't stop. They continued, intermittently, for the next hour. Each time, I heard the distinctive creak of the U-Haul's ramp, then the soft, muffled scrape of something heavy being dragged across the asphalt. It was too quiet for furniture, too deliberate for boxes. It sounded heavier, somehow, and less solid. Around 3 a.m., the deliveries seemed to pick up pace. I found myself drawn to the office window again, peeking through the blinds. The couple moved like automatons, their faces still grim, illuminated only by the faint glow of the motel's wall lights. I couldn't make out what they were carrying now. The bundles were larger, more amorphous. Then I heard it. A low, guttural sound, not quite a moan, not quite a chant, emanating faintly from the direction of room 113. It was interspersed with a peculiar scraping, a sound that felt less like an object being dragged, and more like something being pulled against its will. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was just the wind, or the old building settling, or a hallucination born of too much coffee and too little sleep. But the sound lingered, a faint, unsettling hum beneath the usual night noises. It felt ancient, primal, utterly out of place in our rundown motel. My skin prickled with an unfamiliar chill. The air, which had been damp and fresh from the rain, began to change. A subtle scent, metallic and earthy, started to drift into the lobby through the automated doors. It was faint at first, like old pennies left in wet soil. But as the hours wore on, it grew stronger, sharper, clinging to the quiet air. I kept glancing at the clock. 3:30 a.m. 4 a.m. The deliveries continued, the scraping, the odd thuds, the low, almost subvocal hum from their room. It felt like an endless, macabre ballet. My hands, usually steady, were trembling slightly as I tried to focus on my book. I kept imagining shadows moving in my peripheral vision, just beyond the reach of the dim lobby lights. By 4:30 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. The low chanting had grown a little louder, a cadence of harsh whispers and wet, dragging sounds that no natural phenomenon could explain. The metallic, damp earth smell was thick now, not just lingering, but present. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I had to know. Leaving the relative safety of the lobby, I stepped out into the still drizzling rain. The air was cold, but my skin was hot with a rising dread. The U-Haul trailer sat like a dark, silent sentinel outside room 113. Its ramp was down, the interior a black void in the scant light. There was something else, though, a faint, uneven moisture pattern leading from the trailer to the room door, not just rain. I walked slowly, forcing myself. Each step on the wet asphalt crunched loudly in the oppressive quiet. As I got closer to room 113, the chanting became clearer. It was guttural, rhythmic, a language I didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakable, desperate, perhaps even forced. And then, a distinct, wet squelch followed by a heavy, hollow thud. The smell was overwhelming now, a deep, rusty iron smell mixed with something else, something fetid and gamey, like a slaughterhouse on a hot day. My breath hitched. I found myself right outside the door, my ear pressed to the cold wood. I could hear movement, rustling, and the faint, labored breathing of more than two people. Desperate, I glanced at the small gap beneath the door. The sliver of darkness was broken by a dull, pulsing light from within. As I peered closer, I saw a shadow flicker, immense and misshapen, moving with a jerky, unnatural rhythm. It was too tall, too wide, too wrong to be human. My mind reeled. Panic flared, hot and sharp. This wasn't some strange antique collection or late-night movers. This was something else entirely. My body reacted before my mind could fully process the terror. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet, the wet ground a slippery trap beneath me. I needed to get away, back to the light, back to the illusion of safety. I hurried back to the lobby, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. I watched from the window, my breath fogging the glass, as the couple made one final trip. This time, they weren't carrying anything into the room. They were just closing the U-Haul ramp, their movements quicker, almost joyful, their faces still obscured by shadow. The U-Haul looked different now. It seemed lighter. Not just empty, but somehow deflated, as if whatever burden it carried had been entirely removed. The couple got back into their pickup, no bags, no checking out, no backward glance. They simply drove away, tires squealing faintly as they exited the lot, melting into the pre-dawn gloom. 5 a.m. The first hints of gray light were creeping into the sky. The rain had stopped. The air was eerily still, heavy with a silence that felt unnatural, suffocating. The entire motel seemed to hold its breath. My shift was almost over, but I couldn't leave. Not yet. The compulsion was irresistible. My feet moved on their own, drawing me back to room 113. I didn't want to go. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to stay away, to call the police, to run. But I had to know. I had to see what they had left behind. I crept along the path, my eyes fixed on the door. The smell was there again, now a pungent, almost unbearable reek of iron. It made my throat burn, my eyes water. It tasted thick and metallic on my tongue. Something was very wrong. I reached the door. It was still locked. But from underneath it, slowly, inexorably, something was seeping out. A dark, viscous liquid. It was a deep, damp red, spreading across the cracked concrete like a hungry, living thing. It was too thick to be water, too dark to be oil. It pulsed, almost imperceptibly. The odor of iron was overwhelming. It was the scent of blood. Fresh blood. My heart hammered. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. My eyes were glued to the spreading stain. It seemed to expand, growing larger, reaching for my feet. Panic seized me. My mind screamed. I didn't open the door. I couldn't. I stumbled backward, away from that growing crimson pool, away from the stench of death. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in the lobby, fumbling for my phone, my hands shaking so violently I could barely dial 911. The police came. They found the room locked, just as I had left it. The stain was still there, a gruesome testament to the night's horrors. They used a master key. They entered. I stayed outside, my stomach churning. I heard their gasps. I heard their hushed, horrified whispers. I didn't need to see. They sealed the room. The couple was never found. No trace, no record, as if they had simply evaporated into the dawn. What was in that U-Haul? What grotesque ritual took place in room 113? What was delivered, and what was left behind? I quit that job. I couldn't stay. Every quiet night, every distant rumble of a truck, brings it all back. The smell of iron, the scraping, the chanting, and that deep red seeping from under the door. And sometimes, on a quiet night, I still wonder what was truly delivered. What they left behind, still waiting, in that sealed room. And if you ever work a night shift, and you see a U-Haul pull up late, to a secluded room, don't look too closely. Don't try to find out what's inside. Just let it be.